You know how everyone keeps saying AI is going to change everything? Well, one of the things that's already changing is writing. And in ways that you might not even realize. So today we're doing a deep dive on this research paper, and it has this very academic sounding title, The Widespread Adoption of Large Language Model-Assisted Writing Across Society. But the findings are actually pretty mind-blowing.
Yeah, what's interesting is this paper doesn't just focus on like one specific area where AI writing is showing up.
Okay.
It looks at, 4 very diverse areas.
Oh, wow.
Like consumer complaints, corporate press releases, even job postings, and get this, official statements from the United Nations.
Huh.
So it gives us a really big picture view of how AI is impacting how we communicate.
Yeah.
From just everyday people all the way up to these international organizations.
That's a really good point. So it's not just like writing emails or blog posts. We're talking about how AI is potentially shaping conversation at like all levels of society.
Right.
Okay, so let's unpack some of these findings a little bit. The paper mentions this thing called the ChatGPT effect.
Uh-huh.
Can you explain what they mean by that?
Yeah, so basically what they found was there was this big jump in AI-assisted writing. Right after ChatGPT was released to the public. That was back in late 2022.
Okay.
It seems like ChatGPT was so popular that it really pushed this technology into the mainstream.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I feel like everybody was using it.
Right. And so the impact is really clear when you look at all the different areas that they studied in this paper.
Okay. So the paper goes beyond just showing that, okay, yeah, people are using AI. They have some pretty specific numbers about how much AI-assisted writing is actually out there.
Right.
What were some of the most surprising stats you came across?
Well, I was really surprised by this. By late 2024, the researchers estimate that almost 20% of financial consumer complaints are AI-assisted.
So like 1 in 5.
Yeah. So basically 1 out of every 5 people who are trying to get help with, a financial issue, they might be using AI to voice their concerns.
I had no idea it was that high. I mean, I knew that AI was being used for like customer service chatbots and things like that, but I didn't realize it was already so prevalent in something as complex as financial complaints.
Right.
What about these other areas?
Yeah, well, the numbers in the other areas are honestly just as striking.
Wow.
So they estimate that almost 1 in 4 corporate press releases are AI assisted. And for job postings, specifically job postings from newer, smaller companies, that number jumps to 15%.
Huh. So there's a pretty big difference then between how smaller companies are using it versus larger companies.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts about why that might be?
Well, smaller companies, they tend to be a little bit more adaptable.
Sure.
They might feel more pressure to be efficient with their resources.
Yeah.
Larger companies that, maybe they have more established processes in place, or they're just more cautious about adopting new things.
Yeah, it's also interesting that those numbers are specifically for press releases and job postings.
Right.
It just makes me wonder if AI is actually being used even more in other kinds of corporate communication.
Oh, absolutely.
Like internal memos or marketing materials.
I think that's definitely a possibility.
Yeah.
This study just focused on these particular types of communication because they're publicly available.
Right.
And so it's easier to, analyze them on a large scale, but I think it's safe to assume that AI is being used a lot more behind the scenes.
Yeah, okay. And what about the UN? What did they find?
Well, they found that nearly 1 in 7 UN press releases are likely AI assisted.
That's pretty significant.
Yeah, I mean, this is a global organization.
Right.
And they deal with some of the most complex issues that we're facing, as a planet. It's a pretty clear sign that this isn't just some passing trend.
Right.
AI writing is going global.
And the fact that the UN is using it, it just raises all these questions like how is this going to impact international relations?
Right.
And global communication?
It's hard to say. Yeah.
Okay. I'm also curious about this stabilization puzzle that the paper talks about. What exactly did they find?
Well, so after that initial boom in AI adoption that we were talking about, it looks like the growth actually kind of leveled off in most areas by late 2023. It's like there was this big wave of enthusiasm, but then things just calmed down.
That is interesting. Do they offer any explanations for why that might be?
They do, yeah. So one possibility is that we've just kind of hit a saturation point. Maybe most of the people who are open to using AI for writing have already adopted it.
Okay.
It could also be that AI models are getting so good at mimicking human writing that it's becoming harder to detect, even with the tools that we have now.
Oh, so we might actually be underestimating how much AI writing is out there.
It's possible, yeah.
Just because our detection methods aren't sophisticated enough?
Yeah.
Okay. And then, I mean, obviously there are external factors too, right? Like there are concerns about the authenticity of AI-generated content. Of course, there are potential legal or ethical implications. And then, there's the cost of these tools. All of those things could be limiting further adoption.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've covered a lot of ground, but I want to go a little deeper into some of the specific ways that people are actually using AI.
Okay.
Let's start with consumer complaints.
Sure.
The paper found that adoption was higher in areas that have lower educational attainment. What do you think the implications of that finding are?
Yeah, that's a really fascinating observation. It could mean that AI is actually helping to kind of bridge the gap in communication skills.
Yeah.
It could be providing a tool for people who maybe don't have the same level of writing experience to effectively voice their concerns. But, it does raise questions about digital literacy and whether everyone has equal access to this technology.
Yeah, if AI is becoming essential for navigating certain systems, then we need to make sure that everyone has the knowledge and the resources to use it effectively.
Yeah, that's a really important point.
Okay. What about in the corporate world? What did they find about how AI is being used in press releases?
Well, they found particularly high AI usage in press releases coming from the technical and business-focused sectors. So these are fields that deal with very complex information.
Yeah.
And AI could be helping them streamline their communication. But it also raises concerns about whether it's going to lead to a lack of transparency or a tendency to oversimplify these complex issues.
That's a good point. Like if AI is being used to present a certain spin on events or something, we need to be aware of those potential biases.
Absolutely.
Okay, what about job postings? We talked about how younger companies are using AI more often in their postings.
Right.
Does the research give us any insights into why?
Well, newer companies, they tend to be more, agile.
Okay.
And they're a little more open to trying new tools.
Yeah.
And they might see AI as the way to just be more efficient in their hiring, especially if they don't have big HR departments. But again, it does raise questions about how this is going to shape the job market.
Yeah.
And what it means for people who are looking for jobs.
Right. Like if AI is increasingly involved in writing job postings or even screening resumes, it could have a huge impact on who gets hired.
It's something we need to be paying attention to. Yeah.
Okay. And we can't leave out the UN, of course. What stood out to you about how they're using AI?
I think the most remarkable thing is that AI adoption in UN press releases is so consistent across different regions. It seems like this really is becoming a global phenomenon.
Wow.
And it just raises all these questions about how this technology is going to affect diplomacy and international relations, and how we deal with global challenges.
Yeah, that's a really important point. We've been focusing on how this is changing how we write as individuals and as organizations, but we also need to consider the bigger picture, the broader societal implications.
Absolutely. We're talking about something that has the potential to change how we communicate on a global scale.
Yeah.
It's still early days. But the impact of AI on writing, it's only going to grow in the years to come.
So it seems like these are conversations that we need to be having now.
For sure.
While we're still kind of in the early stages of figuring all of this out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so we've laid out the landscape of AI-assisted writing. We've talked about how much is out there, who's using it, and the potential implications.
Right.
But I think now I want to zoom in a little bit. I want to talk about what it's actually like to use AI to write.
Okay.
Can you kind of walk us through the process a little bit?
Yeah. So there are different approaches, but one common way is to use what's called a large language model, or an LLM. And these are AI systems that are trained on huge amounts of text data.
Okay.
And based on that, they can generate human quality text based on, prompts or instructions that you give them.
Okay, so what does that look like in practice? If I'm using AI to write something, what is my interaction with the system like?
So let's say you're trying to write a press release.
Okay.
You could give the LLM like a basic outline of what you want to say.
Okay.
The key points that you want to include.
Sure.
Maybe even the tone you're going for. And then the LLM would take all that information and generate a draft for you.
So it's not just correcting my grammar or suggesting better words.
Right.
It can actually create whole paragraphs.
Exactly, yeah. And the level of sophistication is constantly evolving.
Right.
Some LLMs can even, tailor their writing style to mimic certain authors or publications.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible.
That is incredible. But it also kind of makes you think about authenticity and originality. Like, if AI can write so convincingly, how do we even know what's human-generated and what's not?
Yeah, that's a really big question right now.
Yeah.
And it's something that researchers are working on. Developers are trying to figure it out. As AI gets better and better at mimicking human writing, it's getting harder and harder to tell the difference.
And that brings us back to the stabilization puzzle, right? Like, if it's becoming more difficult to detect, maybe the reason that adoption seems to have leveled off is simply that we're just not measuring it accurately anymore.
It's definitely possible.
Yeah.
And, even if AI can generate convincing text,
Yeah.
that doesn't automatically mean it's the best tool for every writing task.
Right. I mean, there's still a lot that AI can't replicate about human writing.
Of course.
Things like creativity, emotional intelligence,
Yeah.
the ability to connect with your audience on a personal level.
Absolutely. And honestly, those are the things that matter more than ever in a world that's becoming so automated.
So it sounds like while AI can be a very powerful tool, it's important to remember that it is just a tool. It's up to us, the humans, to decide how we want to use it, how we want to shape the future of writing in this new age of AI.
I couldn't agree more. The choices we make now, they're really going to have a lasting impact on how this technology changes our communication, our creativity, and ultimately our society.
So we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive. We've explored the scope of AI's influence on writing. We've talked about some of the potential benefits and drawbacks and some of the challenges that we're going to face in navigating this new landscape. But there's still a lot more to discuss.
For sure.
In the next part, we'll go deeper into the specific ways that AI is being used in different areas. We'll talk about some of the ethical considerations, and we'll explore what all this means for the future of writing. So stay tuned because the deep dive continues.
Yeah. So, picking up where we left off, one thing that really stuck with me from the research was that finding about the UN using AI in their press releases.
Yeah.
We're talking about these global organizations dealing with some of the biggest issues in the world.
It just shows you how widespread it's become. I mean, if the UN is using it, that's a pretty big deal, right?
Yeah, and it raises some interesting questions, doesn't it? Like, are there certain types of communication where maybe using AI isn't really appropriate?
Yeah, that's a good point. Like maybe in situations where you need a more human touch, like, I don't know, things like diplomacy or crisis communication, where empathy and nuance are so important.
Exactly. Like, we need a lot more research on how people react emotionally to AI writing. Do people trust it the same way if they know it was written by a machine? Are they as engaged with it?
It makes you wonder, like, what are the implications for things like building relationships or collaborating with people? Could relying too much on AI actually make it harder to connect with people on a human level?
Yeah, that's definitely a possibility. And then there's the whole issue of transparency. Like, if I'm reading a job posting or a press release, even a consumer complaint, should I be told if AI was used to write it?
Right. Where do we draw the line between using AI as a tool and making sure people know that it was involved?
Yeah, there's a lot of debate about that right now. Some people think that it should always be disclosed. Others say as long as the writing is accurate and unbiased, it doesn't really matter.
It feels like we almost need like a new set of rules, right? Like for this whole AI world, especially when it comes to communication. Like how do we make sure it's being used fairly? How do we prevent bias from creeping in?
Those are really important points. We need to figure out how to balance the benefits of AI with the need for transparency and accountability and all the ethical considerations that go along with it. And these are conversations that we need to be having with everybody. Writers, readers, developers, policymakers. Everyone needs to be involved.
It makes me wonder, going back to that stabilization puzzle we were talking about, if maybe part of the reason AI adoption has leveled off is because people are starting to have some second thoughts about the idea of machines writing for them.
It's an interesting thought. Maybe there's a growing appreciation for the human element in writing. The creativity, the originality, the personal touch.
Maybe people are realizing that while AI can be a helpful tool, it's not a replacement for a genuine human connection, especially when it comes to communication.
Right. It's like we're seeing a pendulum swing.
Mm-hmm.
There was all this excitement and hype around AI, but now I think people are starting to think more critically about its limitations and about what really makes human communication so meaningful.
And maybe that's a good thing, because it forces us to have a more balanced conversation about how we want to use AI in a way that enhances our communication instead of taking away from it.
Exactly. We need to move beyond all the hype and the fear and start thinking about how we can use AI responsibly and thoughtfully.
Like, we need to ask ourselves, what role do we want AI to play in our lives?
Yeah.
And in our communication specifically, what kind of boundaries do we need to set?
Yeah. And those are questions that we need to answer together as a society.
You know, reading this research has really made me think about the value of human writing in a whole new way. It's so much more than just conveying information. It's about expressing ourselves, sharing our stories, connecting with others on a deeper level.
And that's something that, at least right now, AI just can't do.
There's a certain beauty to the imperfections of human writing, like the stumbles, the hesitations, even the moments of vulnerability.
Those are the things that make writing unique and authentic, that remind us we're human.
And maybe, in the end, that's what matters most. So how do we hold on to that human connection when technology keeps blurring the lines between what's real and what's artificial?
That's the challenge, isn't it? I think we need to be mindful of the ways technology can both help and hinder our communication, be more deliberate about how we use it, and be ready to adapt as it continues to change.
I think a big part of that is being aware of our own biases. Like, are we assuming something written by a human is automatically going to be better than something written by AI? Or the other way around?
Yeah, good point. We need to be open to the possibility that AI can actually make our writing better, even if it feels a little weird sometimes.
And I think we should also be willing to embrace, the messy, imperfect beauty of human communication, even if it doesn't always sound as polished and professional as something a machine might generate.
I agree, because it's those imperfections that make it real, that make it human.
I was thinking about that research we talked about earlier about how AI usage in consumer complaints was higher in areas with lower educational attainment. It's easy to jump to conclusions about what that means, but maybe it's actually a good sign. Like, maybe it means people are being resourceful and using technology to overcome challenges.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way to look at it. It reminds us that we shouldn't underestimate people's ability to adapt and to be creative with technology.
And it highlights how important it is to make sure everybody has access to these tools and knows how to use them effectively.
Absolutely. We can't let technology make existing inequalities worse. We need to work to make sure everyone has a chance to benefit from these advancements.
It feels like we're at this crossroads, where technology is giving us these incredibly powerful tools, but it's up to us to figure out how to use them and what kind of future we want to build with them.
That's a responsibility we all share. It's not just on the developers or the people making policy. It's on all of us to think about this stuff and make good choices about how we use technology.
So as we kind of move deeper into this world of AI-assisted writing, what are some key things we should all be thinking about, both individually and as a society?
Well, I think education is a big one. We need to teach people how AI works, what it can do, and what it can't do, so people can make informed choices about using AI for their own writing.
Right. And not just technical skills, but critical thinking, too. We need to teach people how to spot biases in AI-generated content and how to think critically about the information they're getting, whether it came from a human or a machine.
Exactly. We need to make sure people are savvy consumers of information.
And what about the creative side of things? If AI keeps getting better at writing, does that mean human creativity is becoming less important?
A lot of people are asking that. But I think we have to remember that, at least for now, AI is really good at copying existing patterns and styles. It's not so good at coming up with truly new ideas.
So maybe AI could actually free up human writers to be even more creative.
Yeah, maybe. Like, if AI can do some of the more basic parts of writing, like making outlines or summarizing things, then human writers can spend more time on the parts that need real creativity and imagination.
So instead of AI replacing human creativity, maybe it could actually become a partner.
Exactly. And I think that's where the real opportunity is. Not being scared of AI, but seeing it as something that can help us do even more incredible things with writing and communication.
Okay, so as we wrap up this part of the deep dive, what are some of the big takeaways you hope our listener is thinking about?
I think the biggest one is that AI is already having a major impact on how we write, and that impact is only going to keep growing. It's important that we all understand this, that we think about the consequences, and that we actively try to shape how this technology develops and how it gets used.
It's not just about technology, it's about what kind of society we want to live in, how we communicate, how we express ourselves, how we relate to each other as humans.
Exactly. And it's about remembering that AI can be a powerful tool, but ultimately it's up to us to decide how we use it and what kind of future we want to build with it.
It really does feel like we're at this crossroads, where we've got this incredible technology that's opening up all these possibilities, but we're still trying to figure out how to use it in a way that, doesn't backfire.
Yeah, it's definitely a unique moment in history. We're not talking about like a new gadget or a new app or something. This is something that could totally change the way we communicate, the way we create.
And that's what I think makes this conversation so important. It's not just about the technology itself. It's about what it means to be human in a world where machines can write, make art, compose music. Like, what makes us different? What makes our voices unique and important?
Those are big questions. And honestly, I don't think there are easy answers, but I think part of it is recognizing that human creativity isn't just about technical skill. It's about our experiences, our emotions, our perspectives, our ability to connect with each other in a truly human way.
And that's something that AI, at least not yet, can't really replicate. I mean, it can imitate patterns, it can generate text that's grammatically correct, even stylistically interesting, but it can't capture what it really means to be human.
Right. It's like, you can have a painting that's technically perfect, but it just doesn't move you. And then you can have a painting with some flaws, but it evokes a strong emotion or tells a story that really resonates with you.
So how do we make sure that in this world where AI is becoming so prevalent in writing that human voices don't get lost? How do we preserve the value of human creativity and expression?
I think it starts with remembering that AI is a tool. And like any tool, it can be used for good or bad. It's really up to us, the humans, to decide how we use this technology and how we shape its development.
And to be aware of our own biases too, right? To not just assume that something written by a human is automatically better than something written by AI or the other way around. We need to be open-minded, but also critical and thoughtful.
Exactly. And we need to keep having these conversations, exploring the ethical side of things, pushing back against the hype and the fear, and really think carefully about the kind of future we want to create.
This whole discussion makes me think about something a writer friend of mine said recently. He was talking about how AI can be really helpful for getting over writer's block or for brainstorming, for kind of jump-starting the creative process.
Yeah.
But he also said that the real magic of writing happens in that space between the writer and the blank page, in the struggle to find the right words, to create that perfect sentence, to really pour your heart and soul onto the page.
That's a beautiful way to put it. It's in that struggle, that vulnerability, that messy, imperfect process that we really find our own voice, our own stories, our own way of expressing who we are.
And that's something that no machine can ever take away from us.
Absolutely. It's something to be treasured, to be nurtured, to be protected.
So to our listener, as you navigate this world of AI-assisted writing, remember this. Your voice matters. Your stories matter. Your experiences matter. Don't let the machine silence you. Use them as tools, but never forget the power and the beauty of your own human voice.
And never stop exploring, never stop questioning, never stop creating, because that's what makes us human. And that's what will ultimately shape the future writing in this new age of AI.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into AI and the future of writing. We've covered a lot of ground today, but this is really just the start of the conversation. So keep exploring, keep asking those tough questions, and keep sharing your unique voice with the world.
Thanks for joining us.